everybody, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. I hope you had a really good Monday. My day was a little bit lazy and I can't say I did much work. It was President's Day, but that's not why. I just worked a lot yesterday, was tired. So I hope you had a nice President's Day, and I am ready to read the story, so let me put on my glasses. Boop. Okay, again, we're reading The Hair-Pulling Bear Dog by Lee Roddy. And let's see, at the last one, DJ was so surprised when his grandpa wanted to go up to the front of the church to pray. His dad didn't want to go yet, but he wasn't opposed to them going. And DJ is pretty famous, and so is his little dog, not named Hero anymore, but named Zero. So today we're going to read Chapter 10, Race to Capture the Outlaw Bear. When church was over, it seemed everyone surrounded the Dillon family. DJ wanted to escape all the attention, but he was trapped. Mrs. Higgins hurried over with Priscilla right behind her. The widow shook Grandpa's hand. She said cheerfully, "You just made the wisest decision in your life, Mr. Dillon." Grandpa leaned on his Irish shillelagh and nodded soberly. Yep. There comes a time to set things in order. Pris eased up to DJ. He watched her carefully. Even in church, he wasn't sure he could trust her. She said, "I'm sorry about your little dog, DJ." The boy didn't know what to say. He just nodded. Grandpa spoke up. "Things like that come to all of us sooner or later. We've got to deal with them." Mrs. Higgins nodded. "True, but that doesn't make it any easier. Sam, you and your family join Pris and me for something to eat?" "I've invited Brother Paul and his family too." DJ looked up at his father. He rubbed his cleanly shaven chin. "Hannah, I've been thinking we should talk, but we can't with so many people around." "Oh?" Mrs. Higgins sounded disappointed. "Well, all right." She smiled at DJ. "For a minute, a while ago, I thought you were going to go forward with your grandfather." "Maybe some other time," DJ answered, looking at the worn wood floor. Worn means it was getting old, getting worn out. "Sam, I know you don't hold much to such things, but since you came to church today, we'll talk about it later, Hannah." Mrs. Higgins looked at Dad for a long moment. Then she smiled and turned to DJ. "You know it's not necessary to be in church to make a decision for the Lord. It can be any time, any place." "I know," DJ answered, lowering his eyes. "My mother taught me." "Oh." Mrs. Higgins' voice seemed small and faint. She glanced at Dad. DJ saw some kind of look pass between them. Other people crowded around, shaking Grandpa's hand, saying things to Dad, and trying to rumple the boy's hair. Remember, that's rumple up the head. Have you ever had anybody do that to you? He slipped away and out the side door into the warm July sunshine. He heard someone following and turned, ready to defend himself against Pris. But It was Kathy who stood before him. "My father says you and he got to talk. About going after that outlaw bear, I expect. Probably. Word came just before we left the house. They caught that nuisance bear raiding the church camp. They'll truck him up to the high country and bring the trap back. You and Dad can use it." "Thanks. I'll talk to him soon as he gets through shaking everybody's hands." Kathy's blue eyes focused upon his face. She looked very somber. "You were awful brave back with that mother bear." "My dog was brave, not me." "You were both brave." Pris came out the side door and called, "DJ, Brother Paul's asking for you." The boy raised his voice. "I'll be right there." Only Dad and Grandpa remained at the front door to shake hands with the lay preacher. Everyone else had filed by and spread out under the ponderosa trees, talking in small groups. Ponderosa is a large tree that keeps its needles. It doesn't have leaves. It has long needles all year, and it stays green all year. So they were sitting under there in the shade. Let's see. I lost my place. Talking in small groups. As DJ, Kathy, and Pris approached, Dad reached his right hand out to the big man. Gonna shake his hand. DJ wondered why Dad had come to church to thank Paul Stagg when he had been there at the house earlier this week. Then the boy understood. Dad hadn't come to thank any man. DJ's eyes opened wide in surprise. He never guessed that Dad had any soft feelings about Jesus. He came to thank Jesus for saving his son's life. Dad still held the big man's hand. Dad said, "Paul, I thought I'd lost my boy once this week. He's about all I got left. I'm not anxious to worry about him again, but I understand you're willing to help him go after that outlaw bear. Is that right?" "DJ and I are going to try our best. You know that Abbas fellow and his son are running that bear practically every day." Paul Stagg's hearty laughter echoed back from the now empty church. "It's the end of the race that counts, Sam. DJ and I have got a good chance." Dad asked, "How so?" "You know that Lumley who owns the mercantile store? Well, everybody tells him things, and he tells me that all the hunters, including Abbas, always lose that outlaw bear in the same general area. That's in the Devil's Side Canyon, where Mad River runs through it. I've hunted that country in years gone by, and I think I know something that'll give us a mite of an edge on trapping that bear." Dad said, "I just learned about that trap idea as we were packing up the truck." "Are you serious, Paul?" The giant's voice rumbled from deep in his big chest. "Sam, don't worry about it. I've worked those types of traps before, and I promise you I'll take as good care of DJ as if he were my own kin." Now, that is an old-fashioned word, kin. that means family. So he was going to take as good of care of DJ as if he was his own family. Dad pursed his lips. Then he said quietly, Paul, you went into that canyon at night to bring my son out. I thank you for that. Guess I'll trust you with him again if he wants to go trapping that outlaw bear with you. DJ felt all eyes turn on him. I want to go, Dad. Long's I get to look for my dog on the way. Grandpa cackled and pounded his walking cane on the church step. Going to be a real horse race with that Abbas feller and his boy. I hear tell they'll get that bear for sure in the next few days. DJ said, we'll beat him, won't we, Paul? Paul laughed. If the good Lord's with us and the creek don't rise. Do you know what a creek is? A creek is where the water comes out of the mountains, kind of a small stream. But we don't have much time because I'm leaving in a week to see about helping another church on Sheet Iron Mountain where they need a preacher. Dad shook his head. Paul, it sure beats me how you can leave this here church when it don't have a replacement for you. There's nobody to take his place. I've trained some good lay leaders during the time I've been here, Sam. Hannah here is a mighty strong Bible student. Got several men who can take hold and hang on too. But that church at Sheet Iron Mountain doesn't have any leadership. Hasn't had for over a year. They've asked me to come. Dad frowned. You so all fired up and bound and determined that you won't entertain a notion of changing your mind and staying here? The giant's laughter was pleasant to DJ's ears. Sam, the preacher said, if anything happens to make me change my mind, I'd be the first one to stay here and let down roots clean through to China. People used to think if you went from America and drilled all the way, dug like a great big hole, and kept going deeper and deeper and deeper, that you would pop up at China. But as it stands, I've got just 1 week to get that bear with your son. On the drive home, there was a strange silence in the cab of Dad's pickup. DJ was wedged between his father and grandfather. It was so crowded in the single seat that usually Dad and Grandpa would have been quarrelsome. You know, remember what that means? Arguing. But not today. DJ wondered if it had anything to do with Grandpa making a decision to live for Jesus. His grandfather seemed to read DJ's mind. As the pickup growled up the steep hill lined with beautiful conifers, those are those trees that have needles and stay green all year long, the old man cleared his throat. DJ, I suspect you're wondering why I've done what I did this morning. The boy nodded, looking up at his grandfather. The old man's blue eyes were looking into the distance, past the trees, to white thunderheads boiling up over the high Sierras. Thunderhead is a very white cloud in this summer sky. And lots of times when you see them, there will be thunder and lightning later on. Grandpa said softly, about 50 years ago, I hit the sawdust trail, as they used to call it back then. I stayed on it for a while. Then I backslid. I wonder if we could find out what the Sawdust Trail means. Nope. Then I backslid. But lately I've been thinking about a lot of things. You know what I think? The Sawdust Trail must have something to do with following Jesus. Because when he said he backslid, that means he turned away from God for a while. I sort of figured I've been wrong all these years. So I did what was right. DJ frowned. What made you change your mind? His father nudged DJ in the ribs. Don't ask so many questions, just listen. DJ's answer seemed his question seemed perfectly logical to him. He looked at both men and waited until Grandpa spoke again. The old man's eyes misted, that means they got a little teary, as he took the boy's hand in his. DJ was surprised to feel how thin it was and how it seemed to shake as with cold, even though it was now July and hot. Wasted my life, DJ. Mostly I did. Like Samson in the Bible. He was born to answer his parents' prayer, born to do something special. But Samson went through life doing his own thing, as they say. God never interferes with a man's right to choose, even if it's wrong and not what God wants. But Samson faced death before he prayed again. Did you know I had a praying ma, same as you did? Ma was another name for mom or mama or mommy. DJ shook his head. Grandpa continued, your great-grandma, Dylan, was a powerful praying woman. She used to pray something fierce for me and your dad back when he was growing up. The boy glanced at his father. Dad had never once said anything about that. Grandpa spoke again. Your dad used to go to church some. I never went, but sometimes I thought about it. Guess a praying woman's prayers stay with you. I reckon my wife must have prayed all of the 30 years for what I done today. And your mother, DJ, well, she prayed for us, for all of us. Me, your father, and you. And I sure hope they know part of their prayers are being fully answered. Dad had been very quiet. Seems like that everything since that Paul Stagg seems like that everything's changing since Paul Stagg's come to town. Grandpa chuckled. The Widder woman always has been a God-fearing person, I reckon. She just came back to what was important to her, her faith. But I reckon you and she will have to work that out between yourselves. Now, Sam. My guess is she won't have you unless you get right with enough. Dad's voice exploded in the small truck cab. DJ suddenly remembered what Pris had once said about her mother marrying Dad. The boy asked, Dad, you ever going to get married again? Dad drove in silence. Would that bother you if I did, son? DJ looked up in surprise. His father hadn't called him son in a long, long time. DJ thought a minute before answering. Nobody can take Mom's place. No, Dad agreed. I didn't mean that. Grandpa added, what your father means is that nobody can replace another person like a wife that's died. But the living gets lonesome and they need somebody. God said it's not good for man to be alone. And in the Bible, Abraham remarried when he was old and his wife died. And Dad's not Abraham. DJ spoke with some warmth. The idea of another woman in Dad's life bothered him, especially when he realized who Dad was thinking about. And Pris, she'd be a terrible stepsister. The boy added, besides, you didn't remarry, Grandpa. I've studied on it some these last few years since your grandmother passed on, DJ. But your dad's still a young man. Dad interrupted. I think DJ's heard all he wants to hear about the subject. Dad slowed the pickup to cross the creek below their house. I just asked what you felt, son, and I understand. Let's forget it. DJ didn't answer. He understood in a vague way that Dad had a right to remarry, and Mrs. Higgins was the person he was thinking about. And she was thinking about Dad in the same way. DJ dropped his head, put his hand on his forehead. Dad said firmly, we're almost home. I'll help you get ready to go hunting with Paul so you two can catch that outlaw bear. The boy brightened. It's going to be some chase, Dad. Maybe something I'll never forget. DJ didn't know how right he was. So, this hunt is going to be something he never forgets. I wonder what that means. Well, that was the end of chapter 10 already. So we'll have to wait till tomorrow and maybe we'll get an idea then. We'll be on chapter 11 and it's titled Old Satchelfoot Outsmarts DJ. Oh man, he's going to get the better of DJ? He's smarter? We'll have to see about that. So, I'm going to mark that. I want to tell you again, I'm so happy that you were listening, and I want to remind you that I love you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, if it happens to be evening when you're listening. And I want you to remember, God loves you too. All right, read with you tomorrow.